What's your favorite movie poster? Before I started writing this video, I asked that question to members of my family, some friends, and my patrons on Discord. While it took some a little longer than others to think of an answer, pretty much everyone was able to give me an example of either what their personal favorite poster is, or at least what kind of posters they like the most. Minimalistic, hand-drawn, or painted, ones with cool titles in badass font, ones that are scary, pulpy, or even beautiful. You probably have your favorite poster in mind right now. Maybe you're like me and love to adorn the walls of your home with these fine examples of promotional artwork that remind you of the films that mean the most to you. For some, being asked to name their favorite of anything is a difficult task, but I'd wager that there's an even tougher question that I could present both them and you at home watching, and all I'd have to do is add a single word. What's your favorite recent movie poster? It's genuinely hard to come up with an example sometimes. Obviously, if I think hard enough, some eventually do come to mind, but with that one modifier of recent, the question becomes trickier. The longer we ponder over it, the sooner the realization presents itself that, honestly, movie posters kinda suck now. Or they're at least nowhere near as cool as they used to be. This sentiment is certainly one that is widely shared. I'm nowhere near the first person to raise this issue online and in video form. The benchmark of a lot of online criticism is that something isn't as good as it used to be. We're all just old people raging about how things used to be better, and while I do take issue with a lot of those types of arguments, I'm with you guys on promotional artwork. We had it really good there for a little while. Movie posters, video game box art, and book covers have gone through several stylistic changes over the decades that they've represented the art they're marketing. Trends have come and gone along with artists and marketing gimmicks, but the one thing that has remained consistent is the idea behind promotional artwork. It should, in the simplest of terms, give you a taste of whatever it is that you're about to experience. Promotional art is selling you on something. And while different mediums have very different selling points like actors, authors, characters, or gameplay, it's still someone's job to consider those elements when crafting a single image that we will forever associate with that work. Now, the timeless saying of "don't judge a book by its cover" should always be the case, so in this video, I'm not going to judge the book. I'm judging the cover, rather harshly in some cases. And who better to be an authority on what makes good cover art than the person who actually designed these thumbnails and deemed them fit for the public to see? In all seriousness, I'm no expert on design or marketing in any way. I'm just someone who has opinions and takes of my own. The first that I'm going to present you with here is that even though we're told not to judge based on the cover, there was a time when the cover was really the best thing we had to go off of. Before the world became fundamentally less cool, video stores populated just about every small town, including my own, and every Friday after school was Hollywood Video Rental Day, where my brothers and I would go to rent movies and video games to play and watch over the weekend. This was before I had the internet at my fingertips, where I could easily look up trailers to the DVDs that lined the shelves, or gameplay footage of all the PS2 and GameCube titles, or, most interestingly, opinions on the various titles available, whether that be in the form of posts made by the general public or reviews by professional critics. What my brothers and I were doing was simply shopping by what cover looked the coolest, scariest, or funniest. This same logic applied whenever we would go to our local movie theater and get a look at the posters advertising upcoming releases. What we were taking part in was a system of marketing that had been at play since the beginning of entertainment. Looking at the history of movie posters throughout the decades, it's very interesting to see what elements were drawn up by artists to grab your attention before even trailers were a thing. Silent films were practically sold on their artwork and word of mouth alone. Before reliable photo editing and compositing tools, actual artists were hired to paint or illustrate these beautiful recreations of iconic moments from the movie or enhance whatever was going to happen in the movie. Most of the time, the filmmakers wished their movies looked as good as these artists depicted them. I have a soft spot for Hollywood Golden Age posters where the colors and titles almost leap out at you, and artists could choose to painstakingly recreate the features of the actors or go more stylized. The end goal was always to get you to buy that ticket. Creature features and sci-fi films were less focused on the characters in the films, but the threats that they would face. Giant ants, giant spiders, evil robots, and scantily clad women for, well, obvious reasons. Starting around the 60s, things would take a turn toward the more abstract and minimal. With the rise of independent cinema, drawings and paintings would soon be competing with edited frames from the actual movie itself. This style of poster was more trying to illustrate the emotional tone of the film rather than sell you on an individual exciting moment. These two very different styles of poster would usher in the next decades from the 70s onward, where we were constantly getting a mixture of the two, and some of the most iconic film artwork ever created was released. Some were bombastic, adventurous, and whimsical, others were dark, gritty, and badass. I'd like to take a moment to reminisce on some of my favorite kinds of posters for a moment, if you'll allow me. I have my personal picks based on each style. Universal Horror always depicted the titular creature in a fun way. I love how Dracula looks here and the presence of Karloff's mummy. You can't really get more iconic than King Kong, and The Lost World reminds me of old school depictions of dinosaurs that, while scientifically inaccurate, will always hold a special place in my heart. As I've alluded to before, I'm a Criterion Collection guy, and the reason I bring them up here is because they often do their own original artwork for their special releases. Some better than the original even. But you know you nailed it when Criterion doesn't even bother trying to compete. Anatomy of a Murder, Rosemary's Baby, House, these posters kick so much ass that there wasn't even a point in trying to one-up them. Behind me in several videos now, I've had Romero's Night of the Living Dead framed because I think it's the gold standard for black and white horror film art. The title, the way the characters are laid out, the implications of violence and terror, the tagline, it's a masterpiece. My personal favorite decade for filmmaking is the 1970s, and it makes sense that some of the best posters would come from that era, all of them ranging in style and tone. On the extreme work of art end of the spectrum, you've got Apocalypse Now, Deliverance, Nashville. Those posters that had an intricate level of detail in capturing both photorealistic renderings of the actors, but also stylizing it in a way that captures the tone of the movie's genre. Then you've got those posters that scaled things back a bit, saying a lot by doing a little. Being an independent drama, Rocky actually had two posters that nailed the feeling of the film. Both have this black and white color scheme and cover the essential elements of the story. One capturing the iconic moment that symbolizes a man pushing as hard as he can for his one shot, and the other emphasizing the love that pushed him the rest of the way. Sometimes filmmakers just know when they've got an iconic moment on their hands and effectively use that image in marketing. Moving beyond the 70s, where we effectively enter the modern era, promotional art can be a way of forever immortalizing a movie moment from the hopeful, the magical, or the horrific. Horror films have some of the best damn posters ever, man, and what's interesting is how the best of the best, more often than not, choose not to show the threat, but to allude to it instead. The Exorcist, Raimi's Evil Dead films, House, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. Each of these movies have iconic creatures and shots that could have sold the movie, but these artists made the smart decision to not emphasize them here, but to dare you to come see the movie and check it out for yourself. If you want to see what's coming out of that pod in The Fly, or want to know exactly what the thing is, you'll just have to buy a ticket and find out. It's that alluring mystery that makes these examples work so well. Don't Look Now is one of my personal favorites. Just a photo leaking blood, nothing more. As important as I think it can be to go the extra mile and show off some crazy artistic skill, I also believe there's just as much value in the artists that can strip things down to a single, powerful, minimal image. In some cases, the biggest movies ever rely on just a logo or a symbol to let you know what you're in for. There have been several Batman films over the years, and while I like a few of their posters, there's only one Batman poster that just straight up says, "I'm Batman." The artist really said, you know who this is. You know what movie you're going to see. Get in line, strap in, it's Batman time. For a movie that starred some of the biggest names in comedy of the time, Ghostbusters went with their iconic logo as well, and I think it's based on the iconography of this logo alone that it became a franchise in the first place. But if we're talking about the best of the best minimal posters, there's two movies that come to mind, and they're both Spielberg movies. Roger Castle looked at the original cover of Peter Benchley's novel and said, yeah, that's great, but what if I made it one of the greatest pieces of promotional artwork of all time? It so perfectly captures the impending doom of something lurking beneath the water. The shark is vicious and the woman is helpless. This poster helped to define the blockbuster, and in 1993, Spielberg said,
"You want to see me do it again?"
Again, borrowing from the original novel, there's a sneaking sense of foreboding that lies in the black space around the Jurassic Park logo. It's enticing you to come and experience the adventure 65 million years in the making, but it's also a warning that things aren't gonna go exactly according to plan. Could go on and on about this stuff, but I just wanted to illustrate what I think works when effectively distilling a work of art into a single image, and make sure that my hunch was correct that things have gotten worse recently. While I was gathering examples for this video, I went by decade just to see when things started to take a turn for the mediocre, and I've come to the conclusion that it started to happen around the end of the 2000s. Not to say that there aren't some fantastic examples from around that time, but I did notice that it started to get harder to find some standout examples. To get at answering the question of what went wrong with promotional artwork, we have to take a look at the different trends that became popular over the last decade or so. It's pretty easy to point the finger at movie stars for the beginning of the downward spiral. A lot of people will simply see a movie because a specific actor that they like is in it. And while there isn't anything inherently wrong with that, the marketing became less focused on the themes, feelings, and moments of a movie, but more on the big names that star in them. This led to the phenomenon of the guy just kind of standing there type of poster. Just the main character staring directly at the camera or slightly off to the side, maybe covered in some cuts and bruises and holding a weapon in front of a car or an explosion or a bunch of buildings. It's insane how the action genre, films that prioritize excitement and adrenaline, can have the same boring-ass poster over and over and over again. This extends beyond the genre of action as well and into all kinds of movies, because nowadays there seems to be this petty competition to see who can get top billing and whose face is going to be the biggest. What you're essentially telling me about these movies is that they star this person and nothing else. The only indication that I get in regards to tone is if the person is smiling or not. Now, I know some of you out there may disagree with me and like some of these examples, and that's totally fine, but I think we can all come together, hold hands, and agree that the worst of the worst plague that has taken over movie posters is the ensemble cast poster. You know what I'm talking about. The movie that spent the majority of its budget on getting as many celebrities as possible in it, and each of them are fighting for the tiniest bit of space. So every single poster now has the big dude at the top mugging at the camera and a bunch of supporting characters just kind of spilling out all over the place. It's an unwritten rule that if your film has a massive cast, all of the promotional material will look like this, and it sucks. Some suck hilariously, and others just blend together in the most bland, uninspired collage of floating heads. I already said this at the beginning of the video, but again, I don't dislike all the movies that I'm showing here. It's easy to cherry pick bad movies that also have bad posters, but even movies that I love suffer from the boring modern art style. I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan, and I think the only movie poster from him that I've liked is Memento. Other than that, for a filmmaker who's known for having stunning visuals, the designs here are just guys standing around or looking off to the side. Something interesting that you can do is observe how the promotional art of movies that are part of the same franchise are handled. Visual consistency is very important if you're doing the artwork for a series of movies. Whatever that first poster looks like will be the template for whatever follows. As is the theme of this video, they used to nail this back in the day. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is an example of an ensemble cast type poster that actually works because of the color choices, texturing, and how your eye is always drawn to what the subtitle is referencing. The Fellowship, the Two Towers, and Aragorn taking his place as king are all the focus. The style is visually consistent. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy has this great visual motif of the orange sunset reflecting in our hero's mask. If you're like me and don't really care for any Indiana Jones after The Last Crusade, you still can't deny that each poster just feels right. An homage to that old school style of 40s and 50s adventure films, just like the movies themselves are. Same goes for each of the Star Wars trilogies. No matter how you feel about them, each trilogy has its own look. But every once in a while, you get a piece of promotional artwork that breaks the rules. It does something that doesn't fit in with the rest of the series, but surpasses each and every one of them, and in doing so, becomes the best damn movie poster of all time. Just look at it. So rare does a piece of Star Wars marketing do something so minimal yet emotionally powerful. You don't even need to see the title of the movie. They shoved it way the hell down in the corner because in a single image, you know exactly what this movie, this trilogy, will be about. It's perfect, and I'll never forget when I had this thing hanging on my wall as a kid. Sometimes breaking the formula like that is needed, especially when the formula is boring as hell. Mission Impossible is an example of being consistently boring. This is one of my favorite franchises that just doesn't have a single great poster in my opinion. They won't do it, but Dead Reckoning Part 2 is in desperate need of a poster that isn't just Tom Cruise looking off to the side. Sometimes you get somebody trying to fix something that just isn't broken. Jurassic Park, perfect. The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, not as good, but they're still following the trend set by the first. But then you get to the Jurassic World movies, and they absolutely murdered it. Hey, remember when Jurassic Park was about dinosaurs? Not anymore. Make the logo uglier, shove it down to the bottom, and make Chris Pratt bigger and bigger each time. These are some absolute downgrades. There's nothing more disappointing than putting the original next to the latest movie in the series and seeing just how far we've fallen as a society. Blade Runner has one of the coolest sci-fi posters ever and also had one of the most satisfying legacy sequels of all time. I love Blade Runner 2049, visually stunning in every way, except for the poster. The issues that I have with modern promotional artwork primarily focus on my favorite art form, film, but movies aren't the only place where I feel we used to have it so much better. Similarly to silent film posters exaggerating the visuals of their time, video game box art had even more of a need to do so. Being one of the very first home video game consoles, the Atari 2600 had a library of games that couldn't be sold on gameplay alone because, well, they look like this. Not an easy sell unless you advertise it like this. Atari box art is absolutely wild. Because of the limitations of the hardware, the artists went all out here. Like, how do you make backgammon look badass? Even though the 8-bit era of gaming was more visually advanced than the previous era, the artwork still had to do some heavy lifting to help inspire the imagination of the player and help reinforce the image that the developers had in mind. Hand-drawn renderings of what these characters were intended to look like became intertwined with the legacy of the games themselves. And with each generation, with the improvement of graphics, we actually got closer to achieving these images in-game. While graphics look better now than they ever have, we lost something along the way. You look at some of these old covers and they transport you into the world of the game. The characters practically spring from the box. The careful layering of elements creates depth and a sense of scale to your heroes, or the foes that they're facing. Box art used to literally make or break a game. I'm sure many of you already know the story of Eco. This game was a technical marvel for the time, focusing on atmosphere and artistic storytelling. One of the biggest advancements toward video games being taken seriously as an art form, and the European and Japanese cover art of the game just perfectly reflected that. I love this cover. But this isn't the box art that we got here in the US. We got whatever the hell this is, and many have directly linked this artwork to the financial failure of this game. Because of the minimal attention that video games got from news publications and television advertisements at the time, gamers had to go buy magazine advertisements like those in Nintendo Power or in comic books of the time to hear the news of an upcoming title. Yeah, we're used to gameplay trailers to sell games now, but there was a time when box art had that much power. When your parents took you to the store, you only had the box to go off of. Failures like Eco, based on artwork alone, seem inconceivable now, but this was the reality just a few decades ago. Box art was very important. Luckily, Japan Studio and Team Ico learned from their mistake last time and gave us Shadow of the Colossus and its jaw-dropping cover art. This is how you do it. There are several great videos out there you can check out that discuss this further in depth, but where film cover art went downhill because of a desire to follow trends and focus on the celebrity, gaming cover art started to fall off because the need to inspire imagination in the player decreased as games just started to look better. We can create whatever we want now and show it off all over the internet, so there seems to be little reason to go that hard on covers anymore. If you thought movies were bad, the guy just standing there with a weapon trend really belongs to video games now. Whether they're facing toward the camera, looking down and to the left, facing away from the camera, or looking back, this is the only art we seem to get anymore, and it just sucks. I want to say that there are exceptions to every rule. Some of these covers where the cool guy stands there for whatever reason do actually work for me, and oftentimes if you don't like the cover that we got here in the US, look to the art from other regions. Most of the time, they're way better. One of the biggest things I think we lost from box art is color. For some reason, everything has to be so dull now. It's like we're afraid of making things pop because it'll scare off the mature consumer, but in my case, the colorful artwork of a new Mario game will always appeal to me way more than whatever first-person shooter cover is sitting right next to it. Another thing that I mentioned at the beginning of this video as an example of just not being as kick-ass as it used to be is book covers. Books have been around much longer than anything else I'm going to talk about in this video, and their covers have a much trickier job. There are even less things to sell to an audience on the cover of a book. You pretty much only have the title to go off of and the name of the author if the author is well known. Despite these limitations, there are some incredible works of art that have graced the covers of classic novels, with the cover artists taking several different approaches depending on the style and genre they're presented with. Sometimes the focus is on symbolism, either presented within the story itself or invented by the artist to represent the themes the author was getting at. With fewer limitations placed upon them, cover artists can take a story and go nuts with their own interpretation of it, presenting us with crazy, intricate images that may not make sense to us at first, but promise us that they will if we choose to experience the story. This is often the case with classic fiction, where the selling point is less the drama itself and more the feelings that the story elicits. However, if we take a look at specific genres, we get to see even more creative liberties taken with the source material, especially in the case of sci-fi. Classic, pulpy sci-fi book covers, excellently explored in this video by Nerdwriter by the way, were essentially ways for artists to get their work out there into the public. Rarely did any of these covers have anything to do with the actual story, but it didn't matter. These crazy, awesome images combined with the titles created specific moods that readers wanted to further explore. Horror novels are some of the all-time greats in my opinion. Like many, my first exposure to the greatness that can be horror book covers was the art that Tim Jacobus created for R.L. Stine's Goosebumps books. somehow he's able to just nail the playful, goofy, yet still actually kinda terrifying tone that these books had. Getting older, I moved from Stein to the king himself. Getting my hands on the first editions of Stephen King's novels has kind of been an obsession of mine for many years, because I think his publishers always manage to get it right the first time. Misery, Pet Sematary, Cujo, It, and The Dark Tower are some of the coolest first edition covers ever, and I'll buy any of King's first editions if I find them at a book resale shop, even if I already own the current editions. This is where books differentiate themselves from the other mediums I've discussed the most. Movies have special editions and games have remasters, but more often than not, they're still associated with the original artwork that they were released with. Books, however, are reprinted for decades, and each edition has a different artist take a swing at visualizing their stories. The longer this has gone on, the more clear something has become to me. All books look the same now. I'm going to show you some book covers now, and as you observe them, I want you to keep something in mind. These are all by different authors, are part of different series, and published by different publishers, yet they're somehow almost identical. The annoying, clean, corporate graphic design trend has absolutely murdered book covers in my opinion. I don't understand why we're so afraid to be more creative now. It's like they're afraid to do anything more than some basic effects surrounding the title and the author. You can't even tell what genre some of these books are anymore. This is a horror book, this is a YA fantasy. I wouldn't have known that from the covers alone because they're so bland. Similar to movie posters, observing the downgrade of some of these book covers across different editions is just depressing. There are entire videos discussing just how awesome some of the editions of Dune are, but then you get to the one that I have and it's just boring. Stephen King's horror books have become almost unrecognizable. Book series are consistent, but do nothing to stand out from the other series sitting next to them on the shelf. My best friend works at a bookstore and sends me photos of some of the shelves and displays. The feeling I get when I look at these just makes me yearn for the excitement I used to get going to the library and being surrounded by literal works of art that contained literary works of art. Some of the best recent book covers that I've seen had to harken back to the pulpy, old-school covers from decades ago. The only way they can stand out is by looking back because the idea of moving forward seems impossible to publishers these days. So I've been going on and on for a while now, and the question that I'm sure that many of us have been asking over the years is, why? Why is it like this now? Why don't we put more effort into promotional artwork like we used to? The conclusion that I've come to is that ultimately, studios, developers, publishers, whoever's in charge, just no longer feel that a good poster or cover is a necessary part of crafting a work's identity anymore. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that you streamed or bought a ticket or picked up a physical copy of a film largely based upon the marketing that wasn't its trailer or entertainment news articles covering it or interviews with those involved in creating it? When was the last time that you bought a game based on something that wasn't gameplay footage or reviews by people you trust? Hell, when was the last time you consumed any work of art based purely upon the cover alone? With the easy access that we have now to everything about the entertainment that we consume, the image that represents it just feels like an afterthought now. I play most of my newer games on PC, which means I don't even really see their box art anymore. I mostly interact with the Steam page, and that's after I've seen about 10 trailers each for its story and gameplay. As for movies and books, you've got Rotten Tomatoes, IGN, Metacritic, Goodreads, and a million YouTube and TikTok videos telling you if it's worth your time or not. The idea of jumping in and taking a chance on anything anymore is far less appealing than it used to be, but I think that idea is starting to make a comeback. I know a lot of people now who refuse to watch trailers for movies anymore because they think it reveals too much. This is where a great poster is needed to give someone a taste of what they're in for, but we're not getting that anymore. It's just another movie starring that person. There's nothing unique about the artwork that is expressing anything more than the artwork next to it. Honestly, what I miss the most, and what made me want to make this video in the first place, is promotional artwork that actually is art. I don't want this next bit to read like I'm crapping on poster designers today and saying that they have it easy with the image editing tools of today. It's hard work to try and get someone's attention with a single image, no matter what you're using to make it. I go through that with every single thumbnail I make. Trust me. It's also important to consider that studios don't treat artists very well and give them unrealistic deadlines to meet, and it's hard to do something radical in a business that doesn't encourage it. However, when I look at older artwork, I can see the hand of the artist that made it. Drew Struzan, Bill Gold, John Alvin, Richard Amsel, Saul Bass, Yoji Shinkawa, Yoichi Kotabe, and several other artists who designed these covers by hand, taking God knows how many hours just to fascinate you, to grab your attention and promise you a good book, a moving film, or a badass video game. It's not easy for an artist to get their name out there, but having a cover that could potentially sell millions of copies and be the representation for a work for decades is one of the best ways for that to happen. I care a lot about artists, how their work is represented, how they're treated while they work, and how their work is remembered. And when I look at modern promotional artwork, I don't just see lame, boring corporate trends that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I see corners being cut. I see potential excuses for these artists to not be properly compensated for their hours of hard work. And most importantly, I see a style that is going to lead to talented people who are interpreting films, video games, and books in their own way to be passed over so that someone who works within the strict guidelines given to them by a soulless studio is preferred over people who are doing incredible, unique, mind-blowing work. I don't want to make this video a complete downer here at the end and act like there's no hope though. Recently, mainstream films have been on a serious nostalgia kick, for better or for worse, and maybe that'll lead to this style of marketing making a comeback. Weirdos like me who keep complaining about these things online may put this idea back into the public consciousness and things might change. Who knows? What I do know is that this art, as well as the artists that make it, are incredibly important, and I would like to end this video by celebrating them even more in the comment section. What is your favorite work of promotional art? Tell me down below. If you go to a convention and see one of these artists at a booth, buy a print of their work, get it signed. Support artists. It's very important to do that now. Check out the other videos I've mentioned here. I'll link to them in the description. Shout out to all of my lovely patrons and my executive producer patron Lapis Lazuli VA. You can also support me at patreon.com/MasonIDK if you like. Send me some more examples of badass posters on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel, but only if you feel like. I don't want to pressure you or nothing. Check out some of my other videos if you liked this one. My last video did pretty dang well, and I'm very happy about that. This is a video I've wanted to make for a while, and I'm happy to have finally done it. Shout out to my best friend Elizabeth for basically putting the idea in my head that this would make a great video, because we've ranted and raved about this subject for a good while together. Thank you so much for putting up with me, Liz. As always, thank you for watching my video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.